because she brings up a lot of great conversations around the patriarchy, gay rights. I mean, it's just a myriad of things that she just
I have no focus. I have no niche.
me neither. So that's why I wanted to connect with certain creators because we can talk about all sorts of things. So if you want to introduce yourself and just give people ways to follow you at first, that'd be great.
My name's Therese Lee. I'm a not so young anymore urban professional. I am on TikTok at Therese Lee 6, and I have a YouTube channel with just my name, Therese Lee. I just started loading content on it, so it's very very new. How I came to TikTok was I just was kind of playing around on the app, watching videos, and I really all the female creators that were my age group got my attention because I thought TikTok was just for kids because everyone has this misconception that it's just for teenagers doing, coordinated dances and weird
Right.
skincare trends and like things like that. No, there's actually a lot of women ages like 35 to 55 on that app. And
Mhm.
particularly what they were talking about, women who were coming off of abusive relationships, bad marriages, and sort of deconstructing how men and patriarchy have affected their lives. And I started really thinking about my own history and my own marriage. I'm divorced, and I really started to pick out some things that were really in alignment with what a lot of women my age had experienced. And
Right.
I wasn't aware of how deep and structural some of these issues were. And I have a background in feminism. I used to be an activist back in the day. And even until I really sat down and thought about it, and most importantly, heard the stories of other women, did the light bulb finally come on for me.
Right. That is the crazy part about TikTok is that I think before TikTok, like I've been married, divorced 3 times.
Hmm.
But however, I come from a family background, everybody's married. There's no single people in my family. My mom and dad were married for like 35 years before he passed away, so I don't know, it just you didn't hear a lot of these
No,
stories,
you
especially I think as Black people, who may or may not have come from the church. I know I separated myself from it but back then it was like, you don't tell anybody your business, you keep people out of your marriage, da 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 da. And then I got on TikTok and then I started seeing that we all have similar stories. Like
Mhm.
and then for me, I've been doing this series on coercive control and psychological abuse. I,
Watching incredible.
I have been thinking this before I found that. So I was just researching online and I found those set of articles. But I was like, this cannot be a coincidence that we're all experiencing the same thing. It is a systematic issue, which means if it's a systematic issue, then it's not a mistake. It's not, oh, they just don't know any better or anything. It is literally a plan that is laid out, carried out, and executed in the way that it's supposed to perform.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I got three main takeaways from my marriage. Number 1, marriage is not transformative. And I think we had a conversation in my comments like yesterday or today about this because we are taught to believe that we see this guy, he's not perfect, maybe he's kind of a, I don't know what the modern term for a rake is, a F boy, I don't know. But once we get married, once we marry them, they'll become good husbands. And then they think, I met this independent woman, she's really great, she's really cool, but once I marry her, she gonna become the perfect wife that I want.
Right.
Marriage does not transform people into different people, but we have these ideas in mind that it's supposed to, that marriage will cure poverty, marriage will cure sadness and depression, you'll make more money, you'll be happier, you'll all these things if you just get married. And it's really just not true.
Uh,
And the thing is, even a good guy can be a bad guy. In fact, oftentimes a good guy can be a bad guy.
You're right. You're
Like,
right.
they can be a perfectly fine person in the world, they can pay their taxes, obey the laws of the road, keep their job, but they can be a really bad partner.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it's so crazy because, after being married, divorced, I felt like the last relationship that I was in, I was like, I finally got it right. I worked on myself as far as, they say choose better. And I
Yeah.
chose, somebody who I felt like was going to be different, and then got into the relationship and it literally followed the same damn
Mhm.
script
Yep.
that I already been in before. And I was like, oh
Mhm.
my God, this is just insane. So I almost like died a slow death there and had a rebirth, like trying to figure out like, okay, then maybe my thought around relationships and marriage is just, not correct. Or maybe what we've been taught is just not correct. It might not just not be
That leads me to the third thing. All bad relationship decisions are almost always driven by fear.
right.
Once you let go of the fear of not being chosen, the fear of being quote unquote alone, as in single, but everyone, of course, knows just because you're single doesn't mean you're alone.
Hmm.
But once you let go of that fear, you realize that that fear has been projected on you by men.
Right.
We're not the ones who fear being alone, they do. And I remember the moment I realized that that was true because I told my ex-husband that. It was like within a few weeks or days before I like left the apartment. I
Hmm.
said, you know what? I think I'm going to be okay because I realized that this marriage ending is not going to break me. That
Hmm.
fine.
Right.
And then he looked at me and he's like, I'm not sure I can say the same thing. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, but how am I'm not, I can't fix that.
And I think that's the part that creates that dynamic in them. Like they're so afraid that you're going, like they spend the entire relationship trying to manipulate you to
Mhm.
prevent you from leaving,
Yep.
when literally the only thing they have to do is treat you right and be of some type of benefit, to the relationship or to the union, and that would prevent that but it's not. It's weird to me that that's not the first option for them. The first option is always, let me, mess up her autonomy, let me trap her with this or trap her with that, or it's just really weird to me. Let me destroy her self-esteem so she thinks she can't get any better. Let me cheat on her because then that changes the dynamic. I realized that in every single relationship I had been cheated on. And then I started to realize, wow, I feel like I'm being cheated on because when I come into a relationship, my self-esteem and I'm at peak, and they feel like, well, that's going to cause her to run away. So let me cheat on her, and then it's almost like, let
Mhm.
me knock you down a few pegs.
Exactly. Exactly. It
Yeah,
is destroying your self-esteem so they feel like you'll need them more.
right.
Uh, Sometimes they do it intentionally, but honestly, I honestly think that in my marriage, a lot of times my husband wasn't aware of what he was doing. I think sometimes he was, but sometimes he wasn't. It doesn't mean that that excuses the behavior. It just means that these systems and these behaviors are so ingrained that men can manipulate women without even knowing they're doing it.
Right.
Because I didn't even know he was doing it until years down the road when I finally looked and like, oh wow, that's emotional abuse. That thing, and that thing. I was emotionally abused in my marriage and I had no idea. And it was almost from the beginning of the relationship, even before we were married. I stitched one of Rose Hackman's videos, the author of Emotional Labor, when she was talking about men who walk ahead of women and
Hmm.
don't make an effort to slow down so they can keep up, don't want to walk together. My ex did that all the time, and he
Yeah.
did almost from the beginning of our relationship. And the story I told on TikTok was that I got so frustrated with it that I just stood. I stood in place. We were going to a concert. We parked the car. We were walking to the theater, and I just stood still because I wanted to see how long it would take him to discover that I wasn't next to him. He
Hmm.
walked half a block before he was almost at the theater by the time he noticed I wasn't standing next to him.
Well.
And I look back now and I'm like, that should have been a huge red flag. But again, it's like you're taught that those are little things that you shouldn't care about. Like, and just, oh well, your expectations are too high, and oh, you're too picky, you're too judgmental, you're too whatever. But these things are blatant signs of disrespect.
Oh yeah, it's a and I talked about this in another video that I did about microaggressions. Like we talk about
Mhm.
microaggressions when it comes to race relations, but we don't talk about microaggressions between, inside the home or in the relationships and stuff like that. It seems to be a constant reminder that they want you to have, that hey, I'm here and you are there. And that's what a microaggression is. They're putting it out there by either their words or their actions that I believe that I am of more importance than you are. And those things, I was talking to another creator and she was talking about how one of her guy friends came and stayed for the weekend and it was like a constant battle with her because she was constantly picking up after him. Like he would just open the refrigerator, get a glass of milk and leave the glass and the milk on the counter. Like why
Mhm.
would you know what I'm saying? It's like creating extra work for what? And at the end of the day, you start to you hear that, oh, well, maybe he doesn't know any better, or but who doesn't know any better to put something back where it came from? Like I got children that put stuff back where it
Yeah,
came.
grown ass man. So
Right. Like
yeah.
what?
I think there's either two explanations for that. The first one is because if you what happens is you'll date someone and you'll go over to their apartment and their apartment looks fine. It looks like an adult lives there.
Right.
So there's one option. Either they cleaned it just for you when you were
Mhm.
over there and it looks like trash the rest of the time, or they do have the ability to pick up after themselves and they know how to keep their space clean, but they figure since a woman's there now, she can do that and they don't have to.
Right.
So they're either never real functioning adults or they just think they don't have to be because they have you there to do that labor for them now.
Right. And I done got to the age where I don't even want to figure it out.
I don't know one.
Figure it out.
Because I'm like, I know you know how to do this adult thing because I've been to your home and the lights are on, the floor is clean. Like, it looks like a adult human person lives in your house. So I don't know suddenly what the problem is. But yeah, it's just like, and sometimes they'll be good with some things, but not good with other things. Like kitchen cleanup and dishes, that was cool. But the floor, cleaning the floor, and I'm weird about floor. Like
Yeah.
I can't have a dirty floor. Like I Swiffer and vacuum my floor like every other day.
Right.
Like I was like, how can you not notice how dirty this floor is? It's disgusting. And like, oh, I don't know where the vacuum is. It's literally in the closet next to the coat that you grab every morning before you go to work. The
Right.
vacuum
It's like I
right
live
next to
in
the
a
coat.
2,500 square foot or an apartment or whatever. Like
One
can't be
bedroom
too hard to
apartment.
find.
Exactly. Dude, come on. Just like, and those little things, they seem like little things when mentioned alone, but when they're grouped together and they add up, it's just like a thousand, like death by a thousand paper cuts. And
Right.
it just becomes the emotional labor just becomes overwhelming to the point where you just get tired. Even under the best circumstances, you just get tired and you realize how much space in your mind, in your heart, in your soul, or whatever you believe that's taken up by just managing all of that.
Right. And that's why I believe that it is not a mistake because if they're leaning so much on you, if they're taking up so much space, so much of your time is spent doing free labor, so much of your mental capacity is spent focusing on them. You can never develop yourself to a point where you can stand alone and be independent. That's one of the reasons why I started this channel, because a lot of women, they are spending so much time doing free labor that when they do find themselves in a toxic relationship or an abusive situation, the first thing that they think about is, well, I can't leave because I can't afford to live on my own. Like I don't have a job or I was forced to quit. You hear those stories of, it doesn't make any sense for me to work because all
Yeah.
of my money goes towards daycare. And I
Mhm.
always thought that was pretty strange because why is it's both of your kid, but why is all of your money going towards daycare? So it doesn't make any sense for you to work. So that's weird. Somebody said 30-year-old.
Can't cook chicken.
Girl.
Like I think he could cook chicken. I recall like I don't think I can cook chicken, but I was never a cook and I never claimed to be. But I'm like I'll help. I'll order something. I'll do whatever. But the I was never expected to like put dinner on the table. It was not those kind of expectations were not there. We kind of each handled our own food. That was
Good.
the that
That's what I believe, because it's weird. Like, I always found it weird that when somebody else gets hungry, it's my job to figure
we,
that out. Like,
you're
really?
hungry.
If I have a child or a baby, that's one thing. But even by the age of like 9 or 10, I'm like, okay, if you're hungry, you know how to make a sandwich or figure that out. But it's really strange to me that one person would be responsible for making sure that somebody doesn't starve to death. That's always been a weird thing to me.
And even just things like I managed the finances when we were together, and when I'd been doing it for a few years, he was like, "Gosh, I can't believe how much extra money we have." Like, it's like, how did you do it? Basically, like, I did some magic, but I just automated everything.
Right.
Did math and automated everything.
Right.
That's what I did. We had a certain amount of money in each of our paychecks that went into our individual accounts, and then we had enough in our joint account to pay the common expenses. And I just automated all the bills, timed it all for both our paychecks, and everything's fine. It was like one and done, like
Right.
set and forget it. It's just you just have to care and
Like
do it.
this
Yes,
math.
math magic.
They call us saying, "Hey, Therese."
Hi. But yeah.
Let's talk about some of those because these videos are trending again. There's two subjects: the the wedding cake situations that is trending again. It
The
pops up
wedding
frequently.
destruction, yeah, videos.
Yeah, and then
Second,
Kiki Palmer
oh,
situation is back up there again.
video thing. Yeah, that's why that came up again. So for those who don't know about the wedding cake trend, apparently there's been a trend recently of men getting married and at the wedding reception, even in some instances where they've had a conversation with their wife beforehand and their wife said, "Don't do this." And the wedding planner said, "Please don't do this because it causes problems with the photographer and the lighting and the whole thing of the reception." They will literally shove their bride's head in the cake, smushed cake all over the face. And some of these women spend $1,000 getting their makeup done
Right,
for, and their friends and family everywhere. They've got like a really expensive dress on, and they seem to be doing this. I think it's a humbling humiliation thing. I
hmm
think that's what it is. It's out of the gate. They're trying to humble you by humiliating you.
yeah, they're asserting their dominance.
Yeah, exerting dominance. Exactly. There's only one woman so far that we know of that divorced the guy the next day,
Oh, girl, honey, I
which
would turn in the
is
certificate. We
smart.
won't even force it. This
Yeah,
the marriage license wouldn't even been sent
right.
in. Or,
But the odd thing about that situation is that her family tried to talk her out of it and told her she was being ridiculous. And part of this problem is that when men exhibit these disturbing behaviors, they are endorsed and excused by everyone around you. Your entire community will try to gaslight you
mm,
and tell you that that's no big deal, you're overreacting.
right,
And so the whole entire community like supports this structure where it's okay for a man to humiliate his wife at an event that they planned together, spent tens of thousands of dollars on, where all her friends, family, maybe even her boss, her coworkers are present at this event. So
right,
that end is just ridiculous. The Kiki Palmer thing came up again because she is now being featured, I hear, in Usher's video,
right,
and the song is called "Girlfriend." That's the name.
right.
I haven't heard the song, but the song is called "Girlfriend." For those who don't know, Kiki Palmer recently had a baby. She had being past tense a live-in boyfriend. I forget the dude's name. It's not important.
No,
To I think Vegas to see Usher live in concert. And she had like VIP seats and she was wearing a fun outfit. It was like a top and bottom, like what you would wear to the beach, basically, with like a sheer dress covering it. And she's dancing, having a time with her friends, whatever. And then this MFer, the boyfriend, the baby daddy, tweets out on Beyonce's internet, "You a mom. You shouldn't be dressed like that." And the world just stopped and everyone said, "My dude, she is an adult person. You have no right to comment on what any woman wears, even if you know her or not. And especially if you're in a relationship with a person, you do not get to police her public image, what she wears. So
yeah,
there's two things here. One is like you shouldn't police what women wear generally. But the second thing is you knew who she was when you got together. Like
right.
she had a library of Instagram photos of her dancing, singing, and cute, sexy outfits, and you knew who you had a baby with. But again, there's this, oh, but she's
Hate
mother
her.
now, so she's a mother now, so she's supposed to behave in a way that I feel is appropriate.
Which is
And
a way of
you,
humbling her in the first place. I've learned that
yeah,
through recent experience that some men will have a baby by you before marrying you because it's an embarrassment or it's supposed to embarrass. Now, if
yeah,
you move that way, like for me, I don't care because I've realized that whether you marry him or you don't marry him, you 9 times out of 10 get the same shit anyway. So one is just one
yeah,
way easier to cut your ties if you have to. but they believe that you're I mean, when she turned up pregnant, there was a lot of backlash on the internet. It seems like she has not had much scrutiny in her career until she ended up with
Yep.
him. It was
Mhm.
whole embarrassment of her being pregnant as a woman who was unmarried. Then there was this situation. Now there's, now that he's out putting out statements to say that he has, parted ways with her and stuff like that. So I feel like a lot of men will purposely want to get you pregnant before marrying you because they feel like it's gonna have people look at you in a different light.
And then you'll want them to ask you to marry them for the sake of respectability or
And,
something.
and you'll work harder for it. You'll
Mhm. Mm.
compromise yourself. You'll lower your career. You'll not take certain opportunities, and you'll stay in the house like he expected her to, and not go
Yeah.
to the concert and not look amazing while doing it like they expect. And it was so crazy. The interesting part was we have all these rules which are silly anyway as a part of the patriarchy of how you're supposed to move when you're married to a husband. I'm trying to figure out how this then gets translated to somebody who is not your husband. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
it's really silly to me
Yep.
that it's a part of marriage, but it seems like on that side, due to patriarchy, it doesn't matter where you're married or not. I learned recently that I don't really deal with boyfriend, girlfriend titles and stuff like that because you're literally expected to do the same things that a wife would be expected of just by
Yeah.
having a man in the vicinity of you. He hasn't provided for you. He doesn't you don't have any life insurance in your name. Your his
Mhm.
your life's I'm sorry, your retirement is not provided. Like none of that stuff is provided, but you're still held to the same standard as if
Yep.
all these things were true. I'm getting ate up by mosquitoes.
Been yeah, I one relationship where I am not held to any ridiculous standards. My behavior is not expected to change. I am not policed in any way, shape, or form. And that is the relationship I am in now. And
Mhm.
I've been in a relationship for it'll be 7 years this November.
Wow,
And
congratulations.
very, very happy. And that's this, but this person, this lovely person, has made a point to do all this inner work himself,
Mhm.
not expect a woman or anyone around him to do it for him. I wasn't gonna out you, but whatever.
Oh,
So like um uh it's yeah, like I'm not this person did all the work himself. So
right.
no, he didn't expect anyone to do that for him.
Mhm.
And I think that's a good example of what men need to do. They really need to take a hard look at themselves and say, why do I have these attitudes and assumptions? How are these linked to any, patriarchal behaviors? And what do I need to work on to deconstruct patriarchy? And he has deconstructed patriarchy like Mel's husband has, like Lakeisha's husband has. There
Mhm.
are heterosexual men who are in relationships with women who have deconstructed patriarchy. But when you are in one of those relationships, and particularly when you're married and you live together, you have to make both people have to make a constant effort to constantly deconstruct that stuff because
Right.
it's very easy when you're in a marriage to fall back into those patterns. And at the bottom line is that when you have a deeply held belief that you are more important just by virtue of you being male,
Right.
all your behaviors are going to reflect that, even if in your conscious mind you think you're a feminist, you think you're for equal rights, your deeply held beliefs are going to govern your behavior always. So
Right.
when you get to the point where you see a man is saying this and then acting a totally different way, that means that he really believes that he's entitled to behave in that way.
Right.
That's
Right.
when you either have a talk or go.
Yeah, that's the hard part because it's based on with the laws and stuff changing and it's a mess out here. I'm
Mhm.
really trying to figure out at this point like do I ever want to be married again because what happens when the laws change or they change what marriage is and take it back to what it originally is supposed to be for.
Yeah.
Are you gonna have somebody that you're sleeping with every night that is going to stand up for your rights? Or you're gonna have somebody that's going to lean into that and take advantage of that? Because at the end of the day, it's their benefit and not yours.
Absolutely not. I do not trust them to advocate for us because they never have before.
Right.
On in mass numbers, they've never fought for us or protected us before. So I don't see any reason to assume that they would in the mass numbers that it would require now.
Right. Which makes signing a marriage certificate quite dangerous.
Incredibly risky.
Not
Incredible.
safe.
I mean,
Not
particularly since they're talking about getting rid of no fault divorce, which is just nuts. Hey Zoe,
safe.
absolutely nuts. But you know why they're doing that. It's just one of the many things that they're trying to do. Get rid of abortion rights, limit where you can travel for medical care. And under normal circumstances with a normal Supreme Court, but of course we don't have that, the right to travel, you can't put someone in jail in one state for doing activity that is illegal that is legal in another state.
Right.
But for some reason, all these other states, these I just call them free states and slave states. All the free states, the sheriff's offices and local county offices in the slave states are requesting medical information from folks who've had medical care in the free states, and they're giving it to them.
Right.
Like
And
the crazy, they're giving it
only
to
in this case, only in this particular case,
them.
it makes
Only
you like,
this.
why?
Hmm.
What other reason is it? Is to make somebody keep your property, basically.
It makes absolutely no sense. And so I don't trust I don't even trust liberal governments to protect me. So I kind of designed my life to be as, as nonsense proof as possible. I knew that as a woman, particularly as a Black woman, the riskiest thing for me to do was to become a mother. I think it's incredibly brave and risky to become a mom. And if you were really dedicated to it, and in spite of all the other things, you still did it, bravo to you. But I was like, you know what? I don't want this bad enough for me to take this kind of risk. So I at least knew I would never have to deal with any of those associated issues with birthing children, the risk of actually birthing them, which costs you your life in this country at a rate that is unprecedented in
Right.
other developed nations.
Right.
Um, because I knew that that kind of labor is not the kind of labor that this country values.
Right.
And when people talk about, the reason why men don't want to do domestic labor and emotional labor is because they don't value it, but they expect you to do it for free.
Hmm.
I just kind of shifted my life to make sure I just only did the labor that the world values. And
Right.
since I live in a capitalist society, I went to school. I got a law degree. I have a fancy job, or like, so that's what I did. I just forgot about all that other stuff because I'm like, the world don't value that stuff anyway. So what's the point of me doing it? Like,
Right.
there's no point. So, but
Nicole was asking, was it's going to be recorded for later? Yes, Nicole, go ahead and click subscribe. It'll definitely be here later for you to come back and view the whole entire interview.
I mean, yeah, I kind of wonder sometimes that had I lived in another country, in another place where the government and the society actually cared about women and cared about mothers, would I have made a different decision? And I honestly can't say because I don't see any of those societies. Like, name
Right.
one. Like, I don't see one on the planet that can satisfy that definition. So I think no matter where I lived, I would probably make the same decision, assuming I was lucky that not that I had the tools at the time to make those decisions. And this was before Roe was overturned, and I was able to get sterilized. So in 2015, finally, it took 15 years for me to be able
Yeah.
to do it because I got constant lectures from all the doctors. Like, oh, you'll change your mind. Oh, you have to wait until you're married with 3 kids, and then
Married,
finally
three
work.
kids.
Yeah, it was like, cool. And because she went to medical school back in the 70s and she got sterilized at 22.
Wow.
First year of medical school. She asked no questions. She was like, when you want to do this? I'm
Ah, love,
available Tuesday and Thursday.
love it.
So finally I was like, I felt respected and like really got good medical care that I wanted, but for the first time in my life at that point. But yeah, so that's kind of that I kind of designed my life that way to make it as sexism proof as my eyes can't roll hard enough. Oh, you're a funny boy. Um, so like, yeah, I mean, it's just all of those things. Yeah, Zoe, they do that. Like, you can have all these compromising conditions, and they'll say, oh, but if you take this drug, but what if you get pregnant? What if you decide whatever? There was a woman who had cancer and was denied chemo because
Wow.
she was pregnant. She ended up getting some kind of other treatment that wasn't the standard of care,
Mhm.
but the hospital, the state she lived in, I forget which one it is, maybe it was Ohio or Florida, looked at her life and said, "This 14-week-old fetus is more important than your actual life." And that woman had 5 children.
In
5 children.
insane. Insane.
How many different ways are can they tell us that they don't care? That we have no value to them except for what our wombs can produce and what labor we can do either for free or very, very cheaply.
Right. Basically free labor. I recently ran into a TikTok, and I think I might duet it. I think I sent it myself, but it was a podcast, I believe, and the guy was listening. The girl was like, "You know what? It's really hard out here for you men these days. We're getting more educated. We got higher degrees. We're starting businesses at a higher rate. You know what? Why don't you do this? You stay at home. You take care of the kids.
Got
You
that,
know,
yeah.
I don't really need much out of you. I don't need any money out of you. Hey, I just need you to cook and clean or whatever, and that be it." And dude, literally, legit, out of his mouth said, "I'm not going to do that because I'm not a slave.
And yet, and yet they expect us to do it.
I'm
Because
not a slave."
that's what a lot of them think of us. That's what most of them think of us. We're just domestic slaves to do whatever labor that they think we should do or that they just don't want to do. And
Yeah,
some they
crazy.
out. So I
I
was
was
like,
I was able to suss that. I really am thankful that I was able to suss that out, because from my upbringing, my nobody if both people weren't resting, nobody was resting. You know what I'm saying? Which that can get a little bit, out of hand too. But if my mom wasn't sitting down, my dad wasn't sitting down, and vice versa. Like I never saw, my mom up still struggling to take care or bathe a child and cook and clean up dinner and put away leftovers, and dad just sitting with a beer. Like I didn't see that crap. So it was really simple for me to out the fact that, wow, they really are willing to stand there and watch you just burn yourself out,
mhm.
just for the only reason is that's your job, or you're a woman and I expect these things out of you, and will literally watch your soul leave your body.
Yeah, they will, and they will. They're willing to watch you work until you die, and
Right.
just like, oh well, that's your lot in life. But someone commented, sex. They also expect sex. I saw a clip from I think it was Fresh and Fit. Oh yeah, the lovely guys over there at Fresh and Fit.
Oh,
This man, I don't know his name, but he's one of the lead guys, and he was saying, well, it's not fair because if she's allowed to say no to sex, but I still have to protect her when an intruder comes in, I don't get to take a break from my masculine duties. Why does she get to take a break from her feminine duties?
yeah. There's another one that's going on
And
right, where the guy made a comment and said, "Well, if she's able to not, have to have sex with me, then I can pretty much not have to pay the mortgage anymore."
Mhm.
Right.
Oh, if she doesn't need a man, I just left her on the side of the road. She said, I don't need a man, so I kicked her out of my car on the way home from the date. Like, dude, what? These men have podcasts. They have millions and millions of subscribers. I don't know how many young impressionable men are listening to this stuff and thinking it's real, like thinking that this is a way to like the way to behave. And it's so easy in this day and age to get gurued because I watched that Netflix series about how to become a cult leader, and I thought in my mind of all these, Manosphere, health and wellness, political, all these people who could classify as cult leaders, and they hit at least 60 to 70% of all the little instructions of how to be a cult leader.
Hmm.
Like, any opposition, dismiss it with a conspiracy, like, oh, they're just angry bitter women over 35, or it's just fake news, or it's
Right.
just it is terrifying the amount of influence some of these people have, and they're just on here saying not just crazy but dangerous stuff that's going to get women hurt, that's going to get women killed, and that's what terrifies me. That's why if I see some of this stuff, I push back, because I don't think of it's not about that guy, that stupid guy. It's
Right.
about people listening to that guy thinking that he's their idol, and they want to model their lives after his. And that just it's so important to push back against that stuff because those guys are so dangerous.
Right. That's the scary part, especially I have 3 daughters and I'm raising them, very aware, but how do you I think that's where you have to come in with, it's okay not to get married. It's okay not to have kids. It's okay to be single. It's okay if you don't find viable options and all your options have been listened to Fresh and Fit podcasts since you're 10 years old, like, okay, then you just pass that up. Like, I don't want to be that mom that's like, where's the grandkids and all that good stuff. So to put my kids in a situation where it's just not safe for them because I can't say it's becoming. It's always been a situation where it's just not really safe. Um,
Yeah.
and we've normalized a lot of things that are really not safe. That's one of the reasons why I'm focusing on that coercive control, because a lot of that stuff is so ingrained in just normal interaction that by the time you realize that you are being abused, or you're in a toxic situation, or you're trapped,
Mhm.
it's almost too late, because you have no moves, you have nowhere to go. And one of those videos that I talked about unrealistic restrictions. There was a case where the guy refused to carry a key for the house and insisted that his wife would come home at a certain time every day to let him in the house. And if she wasn't home by a certain time, then he would get irate and yell and get violent and stuff like that, and refuse to carry a key to the house.
That is some sociopath crazy behavior.
Isn't
Like
it?
that is just of all the things, it's even among like the weird coercive obsessive things, that's weird. Even
Isn't it?
area, that's really weird.
Right. And you're like, how do you get in a situation where you're like, you agree to that? I mean, I would be like, yeah, no, absolutely not. But I think it's because, just like, we talked about the whole cake situation, and her actual family was like, oh, that's ridiculous. Like,
Mm.
why would you not, continue on the relationship? Because that person, you have appeased that crap over and over and over again. And before you know it, it just keeps snowballing. And now the requests get more and more ridiculous, because he knows that he has,
Yeah.
the blessing of your family to and friends and everything else. It's almost like the marriage is above all else. And that's one of the messages I wanted to give people. You have to be prepared to leave at all times. It doesn't matter if you're married or not. You got to be able to get up and go. You got to let that situation go, because there are certain situations, like that whole cake incident. Was that going on throughout the relationship? Like, by the time you get a cake violently smashed in your face, you gotta be ready to go.
If I had to say, I'd say there probably were some things that we looking at them would consider red flags, but maybe that person doesn't realize they're red flags again because these things are so normalized,
Right.
and things that we should see as warnings to get out are just like, oh, no big deal, whatever. One thing I am curious to know though is that I want to be a fly on the wall at the wedding reception of the woman who refused to say obey in her vows. See that? In
Yeah.
the black church with a black minister.
Oh
He
god.
refused to say obey. And he repeated a couple times, and she's like, no, we can just move on. And then they moved on. I want to know what people at the receptions, and I want to know what the bride's family says. I want to know what the groom's family says. I want to know what the pastor's wife said. I'm so curious to know. I hope she like does a video or something giving us like an aftermath or an update, because I really want to know how that went down with other people. If anyone supported her or if everybody was against her. I mean, if I had to guess, I'd probably say like 80 to 90% of the folks probably
Right.
were concerned about her at the cookout after that. And
Yeah.
the legendary story they tell about, oh, the Jezebel woman who got married and refused to say obey.
Right.
But I hope she did get some support, at least from maybe her bridesmaids or her family or friends, at least. But I kind of doubt it.
The crazy part is, I normally hang out in the comments of videos and stuff like that. I almost read the comments more than watch
Mhm.
the video sometimes. And one comment on an IG repost of that really stood out for me. It was a woman, and she was like, I would never just stand there while my cousin, or brother, son, relative, male friend, or whatever, got disrespected like that in front of his entire family. Like, how fragile do you have to be to consider another grown adult not saying that they would obey you as ultimate disrespect?
Yeah, and it was, and I had some edits even to the non-religious, non-denominational uh marriage celebrant who married my ex and I.
Mm.
I took a red pen to some of those vows. Even the secular vows were kind of problematic. And I sat down with that lady. I'm like, I know there's some things that you have to say by law, but this, and this can go. And I redlined the hell out of those vows
Ri
before we even stood up and started saying them. We got married in our apartment. It was very small, just me and my parents and
mm,
best friend. But like I was adamant about I'm not saying anything like this obey crap because there's no way. But we agreed on that ahead of time. She didn't even those words didn't even come out of her mouth.
right.
I made sure I didn't want a situation like that where I had to edit the vows in real time. And I'm like, no, 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 we're going to do a dress rehearsal. Here's how it's going to go. These words, we're going to just skip those or we're going to replace them, whatever. We got everything we need for purposes of the law, but we don't need all this extra stuff because it is not necessary.
And then
Absolutely.
another situation I found funny with that, and another comment I saw, were people insisting that the word obey doesn't mean obey. Like, yeah, we're asking you to say obey, but it doesn't really mean obey.
And why doesn't
It
he have to?
just That's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, it's weird to me the obsession that we have, especially in the Black community, especially with Black Christians, where it's like these words and these terms are used even though they're not quite what they mean. Like, the whole insistence that you consider your husband a provider, whether he has a job, doesn't have a job, where he's paying all the bills, not paying all the bills, where you're going 50-50, you still are supposed to respect him as a provider. Like, it's like the bar is getting lower and lower and lower and lower, and they expect the same traditional respect, even though it's problematic. We all know it's problematic, but I feel like as a part of patriarchy, if you subscribe to that, it's supposed to be I do this and I get this in return. It's gotten to the place where it doesn't matter what you're getting in return, it's still expected of you to follow these norms.
They want the title without the extra work.
Right.
The male ego needs coddling and they want that title. They want to say they're the leader, but they actually don't do it. Like imagine if you're in the military, say you're in the Navy, and your captain has the title of captain but doesn't do any of the stuff that a captain's supposed to do.
Oh yeah, that's done.
Why?
That's what I keep trying to tell people. Where else in the world can you not put your money in, or not have a job, not financially be the one who is paying? Where else? And then be the one that considers themselves the ultimate decision maker. That works literally nowhere else
I don't
except
think
for in
in
our
the
home.
UK or Canada, we might be the only country where we see that happening in large amount. Dictator. Yes, that's what you
Yeah.
call it. But yeah, like I mean, if you and I love when these guys go to like Bratislava, they go to Dubai, these passport bros, and they're meeting with the matchmaker, and she's like, they're like, well, her family's gonna expect you to buy a house and have X amount of money and yada yada yada. Oh, I can't believe that. Well, in the US, it's common to go 50-50. Well, yeah, in the US.
Right. So
Like
take
you
this
thought
back.
you wanted a traditional wife, you got to be a traditional husband, which means paying for everything.
Right.
You got to choose. You can't have it both ways.
Right.
They think that
Right.
everybody's so desperate to marry a 45-year-old American guy who makes 120K. Like that's not a lot, or not even that, like 80K. This guy only made like 80K.
Not even that much. I've seen them make way less than that. Can't
I
even support themselves. How do you feel that you cannot support yourself, but yet you deserve, like, I mean, I pay for a nanny in my household. I pay for housekeeping. I've had cleaners on deck for the last almost 10 years. I've had to pay for meal prep, as a single mom, and do those things. Those are things that I actually have to factor into my budget every month. So obviously I've got to be able to work enough, or work efficiently enough to be able to afford those things. I got to make multiple six figures in order for my household to run. How do you expect at only 40-50K that you are supposed to be rewarded with a full-time caretaker, a full-time servant. Like, where else does that happen?
I mean, I just feel like the price in their minds, maybe they're thinking that the price for liberation was that, well, now that you're liberated, we don't have to pay for stuff. So I think maybe they feel like we've somehow broken the social contract by having independence and being able to leave the home. And they figure, well, if you get to leave the home, there's some stuff, and you're not catering to me 24/7, then I shouldn't have to do all the man stuff I'm supposed to do.
But that is the crazy part. They are still expecting you to. I mean, from my generation, when yeah, our moms were outside the home, but it was like, okay, you're outside the home, but when you come back in the home, you
Yeah.
like that was the message back then.
The
You
second shift.
you
Yeah.
can have it all, which meant really meant you can do it all because you were going to have the job, you were going to have the career, you were going to have the bank account, you were going to have the kids, and you were going to have the house, but you were going to be doing it all. And after that type of generation that I'm on, it seems as if yeah, you can do these things, but your first and primary, it's almost like your job or your career is more like a hobby.
Yeah.
I've
Yours
got that.
is front and center, but yours is a
Yeah,
hobby.
like it's like a hobby, but at the same time, you expect 50-50. And even if it's not 50-50 on the bills, like my last situation, he paid the household bills, which were the mortgage and the water and the gas and stuff like that. But food, groceries, car payments, insurance, by the time you added it all up, we're both paying pretty much equal amounts. But you notice that these things are all on my back, but at the same time my job is a hobby and can be expendable at any time. It's supposed to be my last priority, but you're also expecting pretty much 50-50 on our livelihood. Like
Yeah.
the way that doesn't even work out, like the math does not math, it does not add up. And it's like we try to say that, well, maybe he doesn't understand or maybe doesn't see it that way. But when it comes down to picking your fantasy football team and stuff like that, like
Mhm.
add it up real quick.
Yeah.
You points, you add up these percentages, but when it comes to your relationships in your house, you can't figure out that doesn't make any sense. So
Yeah.
that's why I started formulating the mindset that they absolutely understand what they're doing. They know what they're doing. It's just that it benefits them and it makes you less likely to be able to leave.
Yeah. Everything is trying to make you as small as possible so that they can feel comfortable that you're never going to leave them. But paradoxically, doing all those things makes you want to leave them.
Right.
Like, makes you want to leave them. So it's like
Right.
they just left it alone, you wouldn't leave them. But they insist on doing all these things that make you want to get out as quickly as possible. And the minute you have a chance, you leave. And then they always act blindsided. I had no idea. It came out of the blue. And then you ask some questions and you're like, well, how's it been between the two of you the last whatever? Well, we haven't really been talking much.
Because he don't want you to talk no way.
That
He
means
didn't need you to talk to have sex with you and fix his
exactly.
bills and clean up his house. He didn't want you
But
to.
when your wife or girlfriend stops asking you to do the things to help her needs get fulfilled that she's been asking for you to do consistently, once she stops asking, it's over.
Oh yeah, she's
Because
planning. She's
already
plotting.
make an exit plan.
Yeah, right,
Yeah, I started my exit plan about 6 months before I actually got divorced. And I was just like, I was done 6 months before. I was just planning the escape, planning
right.
the and that's what we do because we're like, we know when it's over for us. We just have to have the contingency plan in place so we can get out.
Like I said, you always complain when we talk. So why would I suggest
Exactly.
that? Right. I feel like that's another way to just wear you down. You're just
Yeah.
talking constantly in circles back. I remember I got to a place where I was just so fed up with just asking to be acknowledged for just the things. Like I said, it was always, why pay all the bills? And I'm holding all these bills in my hand, like, well, what am I like?
What
What
am
am
I
I
doing
doing?
here?
Why is my bank account not reflecting that? So I got to the place where I was just so tired and worn down of just asking to be noticed. I remember the turning point for me was we were in the middle of the argument and I was just, I do this, I do that. Like I'm doing this. I'm taking care of that. I'm doing all these things. And finally, it just clicked in me. I was just, you know what? I am not begging anymore for you to acknowledge what I do. Like, I know what I do. Other people can see what it is I do. I'm not gonna beg for your approval or and I literally looked at him in his face and I said, you know what? I am now recalling my energy back. And I think
Good.
when a woman
Yeah, I mean, it's
does
like
that,
almost like begging for your humanity. Oh, and I think
pretty much
can you hear me still?
I can.
Okay, I can still hear you, but I can't see your picture anymore.
Oh
Um,
no. Golly,
that-
here we go
I-
again.
that's what happened yesterday with you and Joanna. But another thing before we go, I think we have about 10 minutes left. The videos I've seen of men destroying women's property, like the man
Oh,
smashed up all the woman's makeup, like $1,000 worth of makeup.
Father.
um Someone tagged me in a video and added up. She was a professional makeup artist, and she added up all what she thought the estimated cost of that makeup should be, and she said that woman should take him to small claims court because it was enough to like make that a significant loss for a person. And
Right.
there was another incident on a British chat show a while back that, as it turns out, the person involved was in on the joke. But even though that's true, I still think it's problematic because there's that thing where the big joke is, oh, the husband destroys something that's important to the wife because he thinks it's too big, too pink, or too annoying and doesn't want to deal with it, and it doesn't make enough room for his golf clubs or whatever it is. And people are still commenting on this video to this day. It's got like over 1 million views, and
Mhm.
people are still commenting saying it was a joke, she was in on it, it was a joke, you don't understand British humor. And I'm like, I know that it was a joke, I know that she was in on it. What
Right.
makes the problem is why it was a joke.
Yeah. Why is that funny to you?
Why
Or-
bring something that is important to your wife funny?
Right.
Why is that funny?
Right. I wish I had an
All
ex-husband
over.
that would play pranks on me.
Oh,
One weekend, had two kids, and the relationship with his ex-wife wasn't the best. And he came through the garage door and he closes the door and I'm like, "Hey, where are the kids?" And he said, "Yeah, she told me that, we couldn't have the kids for Christmas this year." And, he looked all bummed and stuff. And I'm like, golly, like I felt some type of way. And I was like, golly, she's always, pulling the rug out from under us and da 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 da. Da. Next thing I know, the door opens and the kids come in and they're like, ha ha ha, surprise. He starts laughing. And I'm just like,
wow. Yeah, just like, and the whole doddering husband sitcom trope.
right,
Like even Modern Family, which was supposed to be a modern interpretation of sitcoms, Phil, and that's why I now realize why I couldn't keep watching that show, because Phil reminded me of every single worthless husband on every single sitcom, and Claire was running ragged, all stressed out, doing everything. And Phil, not only did Phil not contribute, but he made things worse. He created more work and more
yes,
disasters for her to deal with every single time. And that trope has been in on sitcoms forever,
right,
in husbands. And oh, isn't it so funny that the wife is being slowly driven crazy and being, all this labor and stress is being squeezed out of her until, the day she dies. Haha, isn't it funny?
right. And
Suffer.
that's what I found that dynamic normally is. When you're in a dynamic where this other person is assisting, I make all the decisions. It's on, it's my way or the highway. Nine times out of ten, when I see that dynamic, when they make all the decisions and let's say the decision fails or now the decision makes a negative result, then they pass the buck on to other people, namely the wife or sometimes even the children if they're old enough or whatever. Now we got to all suffer or clean it up, and then you go back to making all the decisions again, and it can completely wears the family down. Like it'll produce a black
I'm sorry.
it's a highway every time.
The highway.
Yeah, I am definitely comfortable with choosing the highway. Once you let go of the stigma, and I was just talking to my mom about this earlier. Once you let go of the embarrassment or whatnot of or the perceived embarrassment of, oh, you've got another failed marriage or another failed relationship or whatever it may be, Honey, the highway is the best way every single time.
Yeah. I mean, the whole etymology of that phrase, like, is it they would just push you in the road if you didn't obey? Like, what is even my way or the highway? I don't know. Maybe it's because back in the old days when there were highwaymen that would rob you on the highway, so it was dangerous. I don't know. I don't know the etymology of that saying. I would prefer the highway. I agree.
Right,
Because the highway now is like the 405 or the 95.
right.
It has like 6 lanes. There's a carpool lane. You got a teenager, and the other side you can ride in the carpool lane.
Right.
We're good on the highway, and we you were paying for the car, so
Right.
you know,
Much better choice.
yes, absolutely. Than the horrible patriarchal dirt unpaved road
Yeah,
that he's trying to lead you down.
right. It is insane. Like it is insane the stuff that has been ingrained in us. I mean, just crazy. That one situation with the girl that was not saying obey in those vows. That was just
That
the
took
comments.
I
The
mean, that
comment.
big sparkly dress, probably spent 30, 50 grand on that wedding. Everyone's around. Photographer snap, 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 snapping. And she's like, oh, I'm not going to say that. We can just
I
move on.
wonder if they had a conversation about it. Because one thing that is funny, when I first got married, we had a lot of wants that we wanted for our own ceremony, but it ended up getting changed by the clergyman that was involved. Like, for instance, I wanted a certain song sung at the wedding, and when the girl from the church got up to sing the song, she changed it because she believed that it should be a Christian song instead of.
What?
Yeah, or, I remember a situation where, I was shopping for his wedding band. I went into a jewelry store and the lady was like, "Oh, you're getting married? Like, where are you having it?" And I said, "Oh, we're having it at a country club." She said, "Well, oh, so you're having a reception at the country club?" I said, "No, we're having the actual wedding there under a tent on the golf course, and we're gonna go and we're gonna." She said, "Well, what about God?"
What
And I
about
was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "You're not having your wedding at a church, so you're just leaving God out of your marriage." I was like, "Ma'am, don't y'all say that God is omnipotent? You know
it?
what
Omnipresent.
omnipotent means? That means he's everywhere in all things, right?"
Ugh.
James said he's not on my guest list.
Yeah, what about him? That would have been my actual response. You're much nicer than I would have been.
Oh no, I was so mean. She didn't want to talk to me anymore. I had to leave the store because, and it wasn't like a K's or anything like that. It was like a little private jewelry store. We ended up just leaving because when I said that and her face just broke, like, yeah, that is kind of what we said. This is kind of stupid. When you challenge them like that, then there's nowhere to go but
Yeah.
leave my presence at that point. So
God did not return the invitation. He did not RSVP. Yes. So I'm sorry, but he ain't on the seating chart.
right. So I'm wondering if, in fact, that it was not a part of their vows, but when they got up there, that it was changed because that is a common practice. I had a lot of kind of bullying by the officiant and some of the other people who were actually in the wedding that were super Christians, and that wasn't necessarily my thing, but they did make a lot of changes last minute because they felt like, oh, well, this is a marriage and this is what a wedding should and will be like, even though I was married. At the time, I was like 21 years old. I was too young to be getting married in the first place. But now looking back, I noticed that a lot of those things were actually changed at no control of my own.
I think that if you're marrying someone, I think the bride and the groom, think of them like the Russo brothers, okay? The bride and the groom are directing this thing. They get to decide if the word obey, what words they say to each other, and Cap gets to hold the hammer. Like, they're making these decisions. It's their wedding. If they want to cut a piece of dialogue from the scene, it goes. Like, how is that even a question? You're trying to make someone say something they don't want to say.
Right, but that goes back to the conversation that I was having with you through the comments the other day. Like, you is it that people get married and they expect for people to change and become these happy people? Or is it that you're taking happy people and now you're expecting just because they're marriage, they automatically go inside this box?
They expect you to conform. I think that's what it is. They
So,
expect you to conform. And when you don't, they're like, well, what's going on? Why aren't you? Because you're individual people. But I
right,
think the idea that marriage makes people one, like the one, man and woman become one flesh, and that's an idea that people preoccupies people. And by that one person, they mean the guy.
right. And that, like I said, it's kind of made me think about it in a different way, because it's almost like what came first, the chicken or the egg type of situation. Like,
Yeah.
it's hard to articulate. It's one of the things that I'm kind of like still breaking down, because like I said, I've been married a few times and it seems like the same scenario happens every single time. And especially, and that's why I did that video on the switch up. Like, there's certain points of every, like for Kiki Palmer, apparently the switch up happened after she became a mom, had that
Yeah.
baby. Now that he expects her to be something totally different than she was when he met her. Like, he was posting twerking videos of her
Hmm.
pregnant.
Hmm.
And
But once you become a mother, you're no longer a person, you're a mother. And there's a behavior expectation that he had of her, and he was gravely mistaken.
right. So is this a contract between two people, or is this now a society or societal contract? Am I making a contract with society because society expects me to be in a certain way just because I'm married? Society expects me to cook meals and clean and be the one to take care of the baby and do all these other things. However, when he met me, I was not doing those things. I had that outsourced, or I've literally been in marriages or relationship where you have showed up. I've had all these things outsourced, and now we're in a relationship, and you expect, because we're married or in a relationship, now there's this role I have to fulfill. So now, oh, when are you firing your cleaning service? When are you firing your nanny? When are you? And I'm like, I'm
It's
not.
done. Like, why do you care who does it? So he actually wanted you to do it because that was
Yeah,
your
he want to see me do it, because for him, as a part of the contract or the standard, that's what wives do. And now that he's making me a wife, then that's what, which is really weird. And I'm just like, and maybe because I'm neurodivergent, a lot of things are really black and white for me. So it's just like, how does that even add up?
I think there's a community expectation, and there's whatever preconceived notions that that man carries in his expectations that you're going to behave a certain way. And the community like reinforces it a lot of the times, which
Right.
that I think is what makes marriage so like exacting, because it's not just you're dealing with that one dude's preconceived notions about it, but the entire community sometimes will back that person against you, which
Mm,
is really dangerous when it comes to things like you're being abused and you're trying to get help and support, and then the community saying, well, what'd you do to make him hit you? And that happens more than we like to think it happens. Pastors, parents, relatives send abused wives back to their husbands because had a covenant with God and you need to stay forever, even if he beats you within an inch of your life.
yeah, well, I proved time and time again. I'm gonna say F that covenant and go on about my business.
Exactly. The covenant, we have to remember the covenant was not designed for us, it was designed for them.
Right,
Like, we need to stop believing in systems that were not designed with us in mind.
right,
And that's most of them,
exactly.
especially for a Black woman.
Eh,
Nothing designed with you in mind. Nothing.
not a damn thing.
No damn thing.
Well, this has been absolutely amazing. I definitely want to have you back. Can you just tell everybody again where to follow you, where they can find you?
At Therese Lee 6 on TikTok and Therese Lee here on YouTube. And those are pretty much the apps I'm active on right now. I'm also on Instagram at Therese H. Lee.
Awesome. Well, my next live will be with Miss Jules. That's going to be
Oh,
fun.
for that one, she's amazing.
Yes, I believe it's next week sometime. I'll definitely schedule that out and put that out on my page. But if you love these conversations and you want to hear more from these amazing female contributors and content creators, definitely hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back next week with another episode. Sorry, it's hard for me to talk right now, but another episode. Thank you so much again, Therese, for showing up.
Welcome.
Bye.
I'm thrilled. Bye.